So, imagine waking up, right? You go through your normal morning routine, you look in the mirror to smile, and you see that one single tooth has turned, like, completely black overnight.
Oh, yeah, it's an immediate, visceral shock.
It really is terrifying.
I mean, we are just so conditioned to associate white teeth with health and vitality. So when a tooth turns gray or dark brown or black, it feels like this alien event happening in your mouth.
Right. Well, today on the Deep Dive, we are looking closely at a really fantastic resource from the team at Westbrook Family Dental. And they explain why this terrifying color change is actually your tooth bleeding from the inside out.
Which sounds completely wild, but it's true.
It is wild. So we're going to unpack the surprising biology behind a dark tooth, understand why, ignoring it could literally cost you part of your jawbone, and map out the exact professional steps required to fix it and save your smile.
Yeah, it's a severe visual symptom, but the underlying biological mechanism causing it is, well, it's something you've experienced dozens of times on the outside of your body.
Yeah, the source points out that a noticeably dark tooth is actually a normal biological reaction to trauma. Like if you take a hit to the mouth, the tooth can literally bleed internally. It's exactly like a bruise on your skin.
Exactly. But to understand how a hard tooth can bruise, we kind of have to stop viewing our teeth as these solid, lifeless rocks sitting in our jaws.
Right. They're not just stones.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. A tooth is a complex, layered living structure. You have the hard, protective outer shell, which is the enamel, and then beneath that is the dentin, which is this thick layer made up of thousands of microscopic porous tubes.
Oh, porous. Okay.
Yeah. And then deep inside the very center of the tooth is the pulp chamber. That central cavity is packed with living connective tissues, tiny blood vessels, and nerves.
So when a physical impact happens, it's not a metaphor to say it bruises. It is literal bleeding.
It's actual bleeding, yeah. When your arm takes a hard impact, tiny blood vessels rupture, blood leaks into the surrounding tissue, and, you see a purple bruise.
Yeah.
When a tooth takes a hard physical impact, say a hockey puck to the mouth or a fall off a bicycle, the exact same physical trauma happens to the tiny blood vessels inside that central pulp chamber.
The blood vessels sever or rupture.
Exactly. But the difference is the environment. A tooth is encased in this unyielding shell of enamel.
So the blood has absolutely nowhere to expand and nowhere to go.
Nowhere. It gets entirely trapped inside the tooth itself.
Wow.
So the red blood cells break down inside that tiny sealed vault, and as they decompose, they release these iron-rich pigments.
Okay, the pigments.
Yeah, and because that dentin layer we mentioned is incredibly porous, those dark, degraded blood pigments seep outward into all those microscopic tubes.
Oh, I see. And since enamel is like naturally slightly translucent,
Right, you can see through it a bit.
what you are actually seeing when you look in the mirror is that dark, broken down blood pigment shining through from the inside out.
That's exactly it.
But the most surprising part of this mechanism for me is the timeline. The source mentions that this internal bleeding and darkening can happen even if you were hit in the mouth years ago.
Yeah, years.
Which, how is that biologically possible? For a tooth to take a physical hit,
Yeah.
seem totally fine for a decade, and then suddenly decide to turn black and bruise years later.
It defies our normal logic, right?
Yeah, because if I bump my shin, it bruises tomorrow, not 10 years from now.
Well, the pulp inside your tooth is an isolated, closed system. It has this microscopic blood supply that enters through a tiny, tiny opening at the very tip of the root.
Yeah?
So when you injure your shin, your body's vast immune system immediately floods the area, clears out the dead blood cells, repairs the tissue, and the bruise fades. The tooth just doesn't have that luxury.
Because that tiny opening at the root tip restricts how much the immune system can even get in there to respond.
Exactly. Sometimes the trauma is so severe that it completely severs the blood vessels at the root tip, causing the tooth to die and darken very quickly. But other times, the injury is just enough to damage the internal tissue, but the nerve and the blood supply manage to barely hang on.
So it's like on life support.
Yeah, the living tissue is in this compromised, chronically inflamed state. It's a slow, gradual decline where the nerve might struggle to survive in that weakened condition for years.
Wow. And then eventually the living tissue completely gives out.
Right. The final breakdown of those tissues occurs. You get this massive release of pigments flooding the dentin, and suddenly, long after you forgot about that fall off the bicycle, the tooth turns gray.
That is wild. But the color change is just the visual clue, right?
Mm.
If we follow the domino effect from the dark color to the internal bruising to the core of the tooth, we find the true casualty of this whole process.
The nerve.
Yeah. A dark tooth usually indicates that the nerve inside the tooth has died or is currently in the process of dying.
Right. The discoloration is just the smoke. The dead nerve is the actual fire.
Okay.
And sudden physical trauma is not the only way to kill that nerve. Deep decay triggers the exact same end result.
Because of the bacteria.
Exactly. A cavity that goes untreated will steadily burrow its way down through the enamel, eat through that porous dentin, and eventually breach that inner pulp chamber.
Oh, hell.
And once bacteria invade that central space, the living nerve tissue becomes infected and dies.
So whether it's a sudden physical impact or, a slow bacterial invasion from a deep cavity, the living center of the tooth is just destroyed.
Destroyed. But there is actually a third cause for a dark tooth, and it seems kind of contradictory at first glance.
Oh, right. A tooth that has had a root canal treatment in the past can slowly darken over time.
Yeah.
Which is confusing because a root canal is a medical procedure specifically designed to fix a problem tooth. Why would a medical fix cause the tooth to slowly turn black?
It's a great question. We tend to think of a root canal as restoring a tooth to its original perfect state. But biologically, a root canal is the careful, intentional removal of the entire living pulp chamber. The dentist goes in, cleans out the infected or dead nerve tissue, sterilizes the hollow space, and completely seals it up.
It sounds like a house where the electricity gets permanently shut off.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Like you still have the house, the physical structure is standing perfectly fine on the street, the roof and walls are solid, but the power is out.
Right.
It's no longer a living, humming home. And over time, without climate control or internal maintenance, the inside changes. And eventually the house starts looking weathered and different from the outside. So a root canal is basically permanently shutting off the electricity to the tooth.
That's a perfect analogy. You maintain the structural integrity of the house. The hard outer shell of the tooth remains rooted in your jawbone, allowing you to chew and function normally.
Yeah.
But the active blood supply that keeps the tooth hydrated and vital from the inside, that's gone.
Right.
And because the tooth is no longer being internally nourished with moisture, it slowly desiccates. It dries out.
Wow.
As the dentin dries, its optical properties fundamentally change. It becomes more brittle, much less translucent, and naturally begins to look darker and more opaque than the living, fully hydrated teeth right next to it.
So the common denominator in all these scenarios is just the lack of a living, healthy nerve.
Exactly.
Whether the nerve dies chaotically from like a baseball to the mouth or slowly from deep decay or is intentionally removed by a dentist during a root canal, you're just left with an empty space.
Empty space.
And that dead space leads to the dark color.
Yeah, you are seeing the visual manifestation of a lack of vitality.
Which brings us to a massive behavioral trap. Because if you're looking in the mirror at a dark tooth and you learn that the nerve inside is already dead, the most natural assumption in the world is to think, well, a dead tooth can't feel anything.
Right. It's dead.
Yeah, like it doesn't hurt right now. It's just a little ugly, so I can just leave it alone.
And that assumption is the very definition of a false sense of security. And it's exactly why this condition is so dangerous.
Because a single dark tooth should never be ignored. The source says an untreated dead nerve can lead to a painful infection and eventually an abscess.
Yes.
But wait, if the nerve inside the tooth is 100% dead, how can it cause a painful infection? There are no pain receptors left to feel anything.
It's true that the tooth itself cannot feel a thing. I mean, you could drill right into that dead enamel and empty pulp chamber without any anesthetic, and the patient wouldn't feel it at all.
Right.
But the tooth does not exist in a vacuum. It sits in a highly sensitive living neighborhood. The tooth is anchored into your jawbone by a complex, highly sensitive network of living tissues called the periodontal ligament.
Okay, the ligament.
And the jawbone itself is alive, constantly remodeling and packed with its own blood vessels and nerves.
So using the house analogy again, the alarm system inside the house is disconnected, but the neighborhood watch is still very active.
Exactly. When a nerve dies inside a tooth and is left untreated, that empty pulp chamber becomes a warm, dark, hollow cave. Yeah. And because there is no longer a blood supply flowing into that cave, your body's immune system, your white blood cells, cannot get inside.
Oh.
It is a complete biological blind spot.
That makes total sense.
Uh-huh.
So bacteria from your mouth inevitably find their way in, and they begin to multiply in that dead space.
Right. They thrive there, feasting on the necrotic tissue without any interference from your immune system.
They just use the dead tooth as a safe harbor to multiply unbothered.
Yes, and they multiply until the chamber is completely full, and they literally spill out of the bottom of the tooth root.
Wow.
They exit the dead tooth and invade the living, highly sensitive jawbone right beneath it. And this is how an abscess forms.
An abscess.
Yeah, it's a localized pocket of pus and severe infection building up in the living bone at the very tip of the dead root.
And that explains the pain.
Exactly. Because bone does not easily expand. As the bacterial infection grows and pus accumulates, the hydrostatic pressure inside your jawbone builds immensely. That pressure pushes violently against the living nerves in the bone and the surrounding ligament. So the excruciating pain doesn't come from the dead tooth. It comes from the living jawbone reacting to this toxic spill pouring out of the unsealed root.
So you're just walking around with a bacterial bunker in your mouth that is actively eroding your jawbone,
Yes.
which totally transforms the situation from a cosmetic annoyance into an urgent medical reality. Seeking professional attention isn't optional at that point. It is a biological necessity.
Right, because the dark tooth is the only warning sign you get before the bone infection really starts.
So let's map out the game plan. When you go to a dental professional to get this fixed, the very first step is always taking an X-ray to check the root.
Always. The dentist cannot see the infection just by looking at the dark tooth in the mirror.
Right.
They need to see through the gum tissue and into the bone.
To see the neighborhood.
Exactly. They need to look at the very tip of the root to see if that bacterial spill has started. On an X-ray, dense, healthy bone looks light gray or white, but an infection destroys bone tissue.
So what does that look like?
Well, if there's an abscess forming, the dentist will see a dark, shadowy halo right around the tip of the root. That dark radiolucency is the invisible battlefield where the bone has basically been eaten away by the infection.
So you have to see the hidden root to know the true state of the bone.
Right.
And treatments depend entirely on what that X-ray reveals. The solutions are generally divided into medical treatments to fix the biological danger and cosmetic treatments to restore the visual appearance.
Yeah, you absolutely must secure the biological foundation before you worry about the aesthetics. If the X-ray shows an active infection or a dead nerve that hasn't been treated yet, the first line of medical defense is a root canal.
Because the dentist has to go in, clean out that biological bunker, sterilize the entire inner chamber, and seal it completely shut.
Exactly.
So bacteria can't use it as a hiding place to launch attacks on the jawbone anymore.
Right. The root canal neutralizes the biological threat. It prevents or heals the abscess, and it saves the physical structure of the tooth so you don't have to have it surgically extracted.
But even after the root canal neutralizes the threat, like we said earlier, the electricity is still off.
Right.
The tooth is still going to look dark and desiccated.
Right.
So to fix the smile, dentists use a cosmetic procedure called internal bleaching. They actually whiten the tooth from the inside out.
Which is fascinating.
It is, because typical over-the-counter teeth whitening is like taking a hose to the outside of a dirty window. But if the grime is trapped between the double panes of glass, washing the exterior does nothing.
That's a great way to put it.
So internal bleaching is actually going inside the house, opening up the window frame, and cleaning the inner pane so the light can shine through again.
Exactly. Because the discoloration, the iron-rich blood pigments we discussed earlier, is trapped deep inside the dentin tubules. External whitening strips or gels will never reach it.
Right.
So the dentist accesses the back of the tooth going right into that hollowed-out pulp chamber that was cleaned during the root canal, and they place a specialized, highly concentrated oxidizing agent directly inside the empty chamber.
They basically just put the bleach right inside the tooth and seal it up.
Yep. The patient goes home for a few days, and inside the tooth, that oxidizing agent undergoes a chemical reaction.
Right.
It works its way outward through the dentin, actively breaking the double carbon bonds of the dark pigment molecules.
Now,
And by breaking those bonds, it chemically alters the pigments from dark, light-absorbing molecules into colorless ones. It literally breaks down the bruise from the inside out.
that's incredible.
Yeah, and when you return to the dentist, they remove the remaining bleaching agent and place a final, permanent seal.
And it restores the natural color without having to cut away large portions of the tooth's outer structure. But internal bleaching isn't the only option, right? Depending on the state of the tooth, dentists might recommend a custom-matched crown or a veneer.
Yeah, because a tooth without a living nerve becomes incredibly brittle over time. Sometimes the structural integrity of the tooth is so compromised from the initial trauma, the decay, or even the root canal itself that internal bleaching just isn't enough.
It needs support.
Exactly. The tooth needs physical reinforcement. So a veneer is a thin, custom-crafted porcelain shell that is bonded just to the front of the tooth.
Okay.
It completely masks the dark color behind a fresh, perfectly matched facade.
And a crown takes that a step further.
Right. A crown is a full protective cap that completely encases the entire visible portion of the tooth. It provides a flawless, custom-matched color, but more importantly, it provides serious structural strength.
So it binds the brittle tooth together.
Exactly, protecting it from fracturing or splitting in half when you bite down. The ultimate goal is always to restore both the tooth's natural appearance and its mechanical function.
So what starts as this jarring, frightening moment in front of the bathroom mirror staring at one single black tooth is actually the surface-level clue to a pretty remarkable biological story.
It really is.
It's a story of physical trauma, of hidden internal bruising where blood gets trapped inside a microscopic vault. It's the slow, sometimes years-long struggle of a dying nerve, leaving behind a dead space that can quietly turn into a bacterial haven, threatening your jawbone with a painful infection.
Because your teeth are not inert, lifeless objects. They are dynamic, living structures intimately connected to the vascular and nervous systems of your entire body.
Exactly. And the dark color demands professional attention. You need the X-ray to reveal the hidden damage in the bone, you need the medical intervention to neutralize the bacterial threat, and you have these incredible restorative options like internal chemical bleaching or custom porcelain crowns to bring the light and strength back to that tooth.
Right. It takes that initial morning panic and replaces it with a clear, actionable plan.
Understanding the biological mechanism is really the best way to remove the anxiety.
Absolute.
But, that detail about the delayed reaction really sticks with me.
The years later part.
Yeah. The idea that a tooth can suffer a hard physical impact, completely hide the internal bleeding, and just wait. Wait for years, maybe a whole decade, before suddenly turning black to reveal that a nerve has finally died.
It's unsettling.
Makes you wonder, if a single tooth can hide the evidence of an injury for that long, what other silent historical records of our past physical impacts might our bodies be keeping hidden just beneath the surface, simply waiting for the right moment to finally show them?